Well, I want to begin by thanking Ben and Mary and Gina as well for inviting the Office of Stewardship and Development to help come up with some tools for this year to help with tax credit scholarships as well as general fundraising that you do within your schools. I know it's never an easy job, especially when it's not your full-time job. Our hope through today is to do a couple of things. Number one, share with you what tools we've created. Number two, provide some ways at looking at things so that you're not recreating the wheel. You're using tools that you already have. And then for you to have, through this PowerPoint and the tool guide, a place that you can go back and reference. So that will be our objective for today. So let's start with why do we create a guide for Catholic schools? Many of you know that Rosemary O'Brien has been working on celebrating Catholic school values, the event, as well as the tax credits for a number of years. We're very happy for her as she has decided to retire and actually probably right at this moment is packing and heading to her new home in Naples. But one of the things that Rosemary helped uncover or helped us determine in her time there was that there's so much information. And the landscape of fundraising for Catholic schools is changing so much that we needed one place to put all the information. Now, the information through the toolkit that you received, I think through OCE notes last week, was titled Draft. And we did that on purpose because this is our first shot at it. We've done toolkits in the past to help our parishes be successful with things such as the United Catholic Appeal. But we're definitely open to suggestions because ultimately this piece is not successful unless it works for you. We felt that in pulling all the information together, this will be a document that needs to be updated on an annual basis, which we will do, because eligibility and fundraising dollars are updated at the state level on an annual basis. One of the biggest challenges that I understand you face is that you can't, as principals, be the sole person responsible for everything that needs to do with funding and fundraising for the school. So through a toolkit, we wanted to share with you what best practices were, what key items to keep in mind were, so that you could take this guide and hand it off to someone else who might be able to also assist you in this journey. The other thing that I think we found through this toolkit is we wanted you to walk away with a list of what are actions or manageable steps that you can commit to. I'm going to talk about best case everything today. But when I do that, please know I'm talking about it from the standpoint of I feel it's my job to share with you what we know as best practices, but each school is different, and you're going to have to adapt that to what works best for your school. So I keep referring to the guide. The first question, what's in this guide? So first of all, there's a breakdown of what do SGO, IQE, tax credit scholarship, and vouchers even mean? Those are all words that have been thrown at us in the last few years, and especially for new principals or for volunteers, this might be language they're not familiar with. Also looking at what are best practices. IQE opened up a portal last year. We're going to take a look at that portal and how I think it can be helpful to you. One of my favorite things is what can you copy and paste? And we've got a few things that we've included throughout the guide that we hope you do just that with. Take them, copy and paste. Then Ben and Mary are also going to speak today a little bit to understanding how you qualify students for tax credit scholarships and vouchers, and then also how do vouchers and tax credit scholarships work together. I will warn you, it's going to be a lot of information today. So at the end, we're going to talk about, with all this information, what's important and what are a couple of things that you can walk away from today's call and implement. So first of all, let's take a look at understanding the language. I have defined here those few words that I mentioned at the beginning. So a scholarship granting organization is the entity that awards scholarships to eligible students. Qualified SGOs receive funding for scholarships from private and charitable donations, and those who have donated to an approved SGO by the Department of Education will then be eligible to take advantage of a 50% tax credit against their individual or corporate state tax liability. And I think that this is really why the Office of Stewardship and Development is actively involved, is because that we know how valuable that tax credit can be, and that the word is really just getting out about that to many people. They're seeing the benefit of it, but what we want to be able to do is promote to donors why this is important. The Institute for Quality Education, or IQE, the state of Indiana has approved 5 different scholarship granting organizations. The Archdiocese has looked at those and decided that IQE, the Institute of Quality Education, is the partner that schools within the Archdiocese of Indianapolis work with. Tax credit scholarships. The program was designed to encourage private donations that would provide for low and middle income to have an opportunity to attend a private school of their choice. This has been a blessing for so many of our students, as you know. And really the name comes from that donations are eligible for a 50% state tax credit. And then vouchers, also known as Indiana Choice Scholarship, allows eligible students to use a portion of state allotted funding to attend a private school that has been approved to participate in the voucher program. So again, what we wanted to do was take those key words that are used out there, sometimes interchangeably, and put solid definitions to them. It might seem like it's a little early in the year to be talking about tax credit scholarships. I don't think anyone in our diocese starts school until perhaps tomorrow. So why are we talking about this now? Tax credit scholarships run on a July 1 through June 30th fiscal year. So last year there was $8.5 million available, and as I said, the fiscal year didn't end till June 30th. However, 2 months in, February 9th, 2015, I'm sorry, I believe that should be 2016, tax credits were exhausted. So we didn't even make it all the way till June 30th before the state said we can no longer give tax credit for these gifts. The tax credits awarded to date for this calendar year, this fiscal year of July 1, 2016 through June 30th, 2017, increased by $1 million. So $9.5 million is available, but as of last night, $1.5 million has already been claimed, leaving $7.9 million that's still available to be awarded. I know that $7.9 million available doesn't create much of a sense of urgency, but I know in the recent principals meetings, it was shared with you that it's anticipated that tax credits will go 30% faster this year, meaning that if they keep on pace with what they anticipate, by December 31st, all of the $9.5 million will be exhausted, and there won't be an opportunity for donors to give, nor for schools to raise these dollars until the new year starts July 1, 2017. And I will say, a week ago is when I developed this PowerPoint. And at that point, there was $1.5 million that had been awarded. So just in the course of a week, $100,000 had already been claimed. So if nothing else, what I'd like for you to take from this slide is, yes, $7.9 million is a lot to still be claimed. But for you and for the fundraising you're doing, we're anticipating that come December, that funding will no longer be available. So what we've provided at the beginning of the toolkit is a list of best practices, because the idea of going out, soliciting donors is quite overwhelming. So what I did is I put a grid in here for you to consider. So one of your action items after today's call will be to take this best practice list, take a look at the last year, the middle column, and just check off, what did you do? That's a great place to start, knowing that from that, you can set goals for what you want to do this year. The first thing on the list is to provide access of the IQE administrative assistant to the Office of Catholic Schools, as well as the Office of Stewardship and Development. Why is that important? Number one, the majority of schools have already done that. And by doing that, you allow us to help market to the schools on your behalf. So the e-cards that we create, we had an e-card created that went out July 1 stating that it was a new fiscal year and that $9.5 million was available. From that email push, we know that dollars came in through the IQE website, and we were pleased to be part in that and making that announcement so that your donors who are part of the IQE administrative system received word on that. We're not going to be contacting the donors who designate to your school to do any other sort of fundraising. It is simply to use that data to make them aware of different e-blast messages that we can send out. It's also important that your school identifies a person who will manage the program. Principals, you cannot do this alone. There are too many other things on your plate. So the person who manages the scholarship program is somebody who's taking a look and determining who qualifies and who doesn't. Do you have the right paperwork? Do you have the right documentation? And are you keeping sufficient records on all of that? I'm going to jump down a little. Are you contacting past donors? Do you have packets prepared for when someone says, hey, I hear that the tax credits are available again. Can you tell me more about that? We want you to have those tools ready so that you can give pieces to people who are interested. I think the most important role that a principal can play in this entire cultivation process is saying thank you. If there's nothing else you do, make sure that anyone who gives through the IQE portal and designates your school receives a thank you. It doesn't have to be an elaborate letter. It can just be a letter that says thank you. My favorite thing to do also in order to say thanks is to do phone calls. So Ben and Mary were laughing when I told them this story, but years ago for the United Catholic Appeal, we started doing thank you calls to donors who had given gifts of $1,500 or more. And we have about 1,000 of them who do that. But the calls, when we started them, went something like this. Hello, may I speak with Mr. Smith? This is he. Mr. Smith, this is Jolinda from the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. I just wanted to call and say thank you so much for your gift to the United Catholic Appeal. And that was followed by Mr. Smith saying, well, thanks, but I'm not interested. And it took a little bit of time for him to, through the conversations, realize that, no, Mr. Smith, I'm not calling to ask you for anything additional. We just feel that for our top supporters, it's important to call and say thank you. And then we were typically met with some silence of, okay, no one ever done that before. What we found in those instances, and I know that Catholic Charities used this thank you model as well, is that in some of those instances, people were so shocked by the phone calls that we would get follow-up notes from them thanking us for calling them. And in some cases, we actually received additional donations. Again, they were never solicited. That was never the point. But people just were so appreciative that we reached out to them, that the organization came top of mind, and they were willing to make another gift. Another thing, as we just quickly glance down this list, that you can do as one of the best practices is recruit a team captain. So this isn't the individual who's managing the program, making sure people qualify and that the paperwork's filled out. But this team captain is the point person or the communication liaison for your school regarding everything tax credit scholarship related. So if your school commission already has a communications committee, this would be a great task for the chair to take over and run with. When messages need to go out, when we need to send reminders to donors, when we need to tell donors great stories. And a great story could be, because of generous gifts we received last year, 6 new students were welcomed into our school this year. Those are the things people want. They want to be able to see that their gift isn't just a dollar amount, it's having an impact. It's touching students. And one, though it's the last thing on the list, I would say one of the most important things, which is the hardest to do, is to communicate year-round about the tax credit scholarships. We think that there's a beginning and an end here, but for donors who want their gift to be meaningful and impactful, they need to hear year-round what's happening because of that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So when you look at that list, I really looked through it and thought, why do so many of these best practices involve an action? So let me pull up my list here real quick. So in those cases, you're recruiting or you're calling. And the reason an action is involved because fundraising is about developing a relationship. As I mentioned just a minute ago, donors want to know that their donation is making a meaningful difference. The other thing that we know through fundraising best practices is that money follows mission. People want to get on board with a winning solution. And I feel that our Catholic schools are a winning solution for so many students. The action steps that we're asking you to do are to help promote the mission of your school, and they allow you to engage donors in conversation. So best practices for promoting tax credit scholarships year-round. Why would you do that? It creates awareness, it shows appreciation, it demonstrates how dollars are being used, and it keeps your donors apprised of the funds that are available to offset their personal and corporate tax liability. As I mentioned, this is one of the hardest ones because it requires you to talk to people year-round. And this is a whole nother group of constituents that you're talking to, in addition to your students and your parents and your alumni. Hopefully some of them overlapped and are the same segment. What I encourage you to do is don't create new pieces to promote the tax credit scholarships. Use pieces that you already have and weave this information in. What I often find in our marketing for fundraising is that whoever the doer is, whoever is the person creating the messages, has spent so much time with a piece that they think, oh my gosh, I'm so sick and tired of looking at this piece or at these two paragraphs that define this program. So they put it aside, check it off the list, this has been used. But the average person has to hear a message 7 to 10 times before they act on it. So this is an opportunity to take the best piece you wrote last year about the tax credit scholarships, tweak your numbers on how it has impacted your school or a specific student, if you can keep that information, if you can share it, yet keep it confidential, and reuse it. Put a blurb in your newsletters. And the emails that you send out, you can put a blurb there as well. Take the exact same message that you send in a newsletter or an email and make that part of a tweet or a Facebook post that you do. It's highly unlikely that anyone is going to say, hey, I see that you're sending the exact same message out in 3 different places. We've actually had the opposite effect happen. With United Catholic Appeal, what we do in the criterion is do an ad, and then about 5 days later, send out the exact same ad with a different call to action and an e-blast. And what we hear from readers of the criterion who see these is, wow, it was brought to my attention in the criterion, but I didn't really do anything with it. But when it came through as an email, it called me to take action. I encourage you in the same way. Don't reinvent the wheel over and over again. Take pieces that you've stated and use them in different ways. You can even take some of the messages you used last year and reuse them. And as I mentioned before, if there's nothing else that you as a principal do in this process, make sure that you're saying thank you, because that act of gratitude will create a word of mouth campaign where the person that you thank will tell their friends, maybe not that you called and said thank you, but will tell them about, hey, did you hear? We were able to reduce our taxes through this thing called tax credit scholarships. So those are some ways that we suggest you go about promoting tax credit scholarships. I think it's also important that you define measurable actions that will create an impact. So one thing that we had a director for Catholic Charities that they used to do is they started every single day with a phone call to a donor and ended every single day with a phone call to a donor. Again, many of these were voicemails that took no more than 2 minutes to dial the phone number and leave a message. But I'm asking you, can you make a commitment of not 2 phone calls a day, but of 1 phone call a week? During that time, can you just pick up the phone and thank an IQE donor? And then when those calls are completed, could you take that 1 call per week and reach out to a prospective donor? And the message to them can be very simple. I am Sally from St. Mary's School, And I just wanted to share with you one of the programs that many of our constituents find helpful to them. It's the Tax Credit Scholarship. Have you heard of it? Just begin open dialogue with them. As we looked at setting what the goal for celebrating Catholic school values was going to be this year, we went back and forth on what those numbers looked like. And one of the discussions was the goal, or the amount of money that's raised through the event. Last year was $5.6 million. Is really dependent on the schools. People aren't giving to the Office of Stewardship and Development for this. They're wanting to give to you locally. So the one thing that, as you're setting your goals or your action steps, I would encourage you to take a look at who donated last year and simply set not a dollar goal, but a donor goal. How many donors do you feel is a stretch, yet reasonable, for you as a school to obtain? So if you had 10 donors last year, you do a 10% increase, you're just looking at adding one more donor on. Or if you do a 20% increase in your donor base, you're adding 3 more donors on. You might think, okay, but we're pretty good where we're at. I don't really need any more money. We've got a good base here. But I warn you of donor attrition. Even though it is a great tax credit for many people, donors do fall off for different reasons. They might change churches. They might move out of state. They might pass away. They might have medical challenges that come up that keep them from giving as much. So if 10 donors worked for your school last year, or if 50 donors, whatever the number is, worked for your school last year, remember that donor attrition does happen, and that it's important that you are looking at how do you grow the number of donors you're going to have. Because we know as you grow donors, you'll incrementally grow dollars as well. But you don't want to be in a position where you lose 1 or 2 key donors and you don't have anyone in your pipeline to fill that void. Because that void means students attending Catholic school. Whenever we're managing a program like this, there's the tendency to think that, okay, well, we've got to create a spreadsheet for this. We've got to keep all this information here. What I encourage you to do is to take a look at the IQE portal. It's a valuable tool for you to monitor gifts, find donor contact information, search the system to look for a specific gift, and then download information into Excel. Unless you're running a very elaborate program, which I know some of you are, this is your database. There's no need to create another tracking spreadsheet. I pulled up just a few pages from the IQE portal, which I will say was extremely easy to use. I was actually surprised at the ease of it. So when you're starting this year, your first step is, who were our donors last year? And when did they give? You can log into your IQE portal, go to your donations tab. It's going to ask you to select your school, and then it's going to pull up a range of who your donors were, what date they gave, the amount, was it a one-time or a reoccurring gift, and then how did they give, check, credit card. While this information here on the screen is valuable, it's more valuable to me if you click this button here at the bottom that says Download Results CSV, because what you're going to see there is an Excel file that pops up that you can then create mail merges from. No one's having to re-enter information into a different spreadsheet. You can just pull information through that file. One of the great things, too, about the system is that when you pull up a certain donor, so I've highlighted here the first individual on this line, you can go in, and if you want to do handwritten notes, if you don't want to take the time to pull that Excel file to do that, you can just click on their donation, and here you have the donor as well as the address that they gave, and also the amount of their gift. You can just send a quick note. Again, your notes don't have to be elaborate. They can be a simple thank you with just a quick note from you, handwritten. I'm sure you also get calls from donors who say, did you get my gift of, or can you see when the last time I made a gift was? Instead of having to go through IQE to get this information, as I know was a manual process before, there's a button called Search and Filter, where you can actually go in and enter someone's last name or the amount and pull that information up as well. Again, you'll see down there just before the large Apply button, you can download all that data into a CSV file as well. So I encourage you, as one of the first things you do, go into the system, do a download of past donors. It's going to bring up an Excel file with all these different columns. Merge thank you letters from there. If your school is currently doing e-blast or e-communication, you can copy and paste their email addresses into MailChimp. Is a free system that some use. Others use a more advanced system like Constant Contact or Exact Target, which is now Salesforce. You can use the email addresses in there. This is also something you don't have to do alone. Do you have another key staff member that can do follow-up calls? You know, this is an Excel file. One of the things that you can do is you can hide the column that says how much they gave, because that doesn't have to be public information to everyone. And someone can honestly then say, you know, I wasn't told what your gift amount was. I was just told that you're extremely generous to our school, and I just wanted to call and say thank you. I mentioned early on that one of the things that I feel is always a benefit is if you have resources that you can copy and paste. So we've listed here on this page 4 different things that we think that would be good tools for you to copy and paste, and where within the toolkit you can find them. So the annual donor development calendar. Again, one of the most difficult but most important things to do is year-round awareness and outreach. At the very beginning of the toolkit, pages 4 and 5, you're going to see many examples of what those outreaches could be and how you can implement them. Build those into your master school calendar. Another piece that are good, pieces that are good to use in newsletters or packets that you give out are the tax credits, examples of how those are a significant cash value to donors, and those are on appendix pages 2 and 3. Essentially, all of the appendix that are within the kit are there and created in mind so that you can take them, copy, paste them, and just reuse them. You can add your logo, the school logo, to the piece to brand it specifically for you. Appendix 5 has a thank you letter. When you go to the Office of Catholic Schools website, I know there you have your own portal where you can log in and get tools and resources. They've saved each one of the appendix out there as its own file. And the thank you letter that's already written is saved as a Word document, so you can download that. You probably want to tweak some of the words or the tone to fit your school. Then just save that, and you have that ongoing for the rest of the year, where you can pull and download from the IQE portal who has given a gift into this letter. I know that many of the schools now have Twitter, Facebook. I've seen some even across the nation with Instagram accounts. Finding content to put in those pieces can be difficult. The Office of Catholic Schools has provided a great tool, and it's Appendix 11 of the Toolkit, and it's essentially facts about Catholic schools within the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. What I'm suggesting here is pull out one of those facts. So they're in the middle of the screen where it says Start With. In this instance, I've started with over 2,300 students received Indiana tax credit scholarships through the IQE scholarship granting organization last year. That's a great fact that you can use on Facebook, Twitter. You can also use it in a newsletter or in an email communication that you do. From that, though, now add an action. So you start with a fact. Then I encourage you to add an action. And I've offered 3 suggestions here. Act now to support St. Joan of Arc at, and you link them to the IQE site. Or as a way to say thank you, St. John's School is humbled by the donors who supported our students through this opportunity. Thank you. Or even learn more about how your gift could make a difference at, and you link them to the IQE site. So facts are good, but what's even better is giving people an action or a cultivation through a thank you. I think from Appendix page 11, as well as facts that you have about your own school, you could have a tweet or a Facebook post a week just copying one of the facts and adding an action to it. It doesn't have to be, the action doesn't have to change week after week. What you want to do is you want to drive donors to the site where they can make a difference. So I think that's one of the key pieces I would take away from today's call is if you're struggling of, well, how do I even get this information out? I can't add another thing to my schedule. Take a look at the Appendix 11 as well as the action statements that you can customize to your school and begin using those, one of those in each of the communications you send out. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mary and Ben to talk about how to qualify students for tax credit scholarships and vouchers. But I know one thing that they shared with me is that this is a really quick overview and that you should be mindful that the compliance guide that you've received outlines all of the guidelines. And more importantly, keeping documentation is key. So make sure that you have an owner that's keeping the information, that you check in with that owner, and that you have all of the documents that are critical to the process.
Thank you, Jolinda, so much. That's been so helpful, and I hope all of those that are on the webinar today have taken away some good strategies with them. But just to reiterate what Jolinda said in regards to the compliance guidelines, as you know, Eric Bangert in our office has been working on that and updates that each year, and you can find that on our website. But what Jolinda said in regards to making sure that you have the documentation there at the local level and on file is so important. I hear more and more about audits that are taking place in our schools by the Department of Ed and the state, and it's just so important to make sure that we do have that proper documentation so that if our schools or if your school would happen to be audited, you would be prepared for that. And as you know, with Brad Pendleton and the Choice Weekly updates, he is very clear through his weekly updates as to documentation. He even provides a checklist of what needs to be in place for those students that are receiving a state voucher. What you see on your screen now is a nice little pamphlet that Cindy in our office, Clark, has put together, and you can use it with your donors. If you would like a copy of it, it is on our website. You can print it directly from there. We can also make some copies for you if you would like. But this table here is showing the eligible guidelines, the financial guidelines to qualify for the voucher, and you can use that same table for the tax credit scholarship. So as you are all aware, and I'm just going to go through this rather quickly because I know that you guys have been doing this for a while and are very familiar with it, but you will find this flyer as Appendix 10 in your toolkit, and the third column, the 200% free and reduced lunch, is what you can use as your guidelines for your tax credit scholarship, which is a little more generous than just the state voucher. And the state voucher, of course, is using those first two columns, the 100 and 150% of free and reduced, and the third column if you are using it as a special ed voucher. Another thing I wanted to mention is just a reminder that you can give students both a voucher, a state voucher, the full voucher, or if maybe that family only qualifies for a 50% state voucher. But remember, you can give that tax credit scholarship on top of that. It's okay to do both. And IQE gives some specific guidelines on different levels of giving, different levels of scholarships, that if you would have say you have the 100% free and reduced in one tier, and then 150%, and then the 200%. Since that 200% may be receiving, or that 150% may be receiving that full state voucher, it's okay to give them the tax credit scholarship at a smaller amount, maybe that $500. But a 50% voucher, maybe you want to give them a $1,000 tax credit scholarship. Just keep that in mind as you continue to be able to provide the financial means for all students that might want to come to our schools to be able to do so through that tax credit scholarship. Applications for a tax credit scholarship, I believe, is still open year-round. I know you, of course, are getting families applications in for that now, as well as the voucher. But I believe the tax, unless IQE has changed that, but the tax credit scholarship, you know, if you have a new child come into your building, say in October or even after January, the first of the year, they can still apply for that tax credit scholarship and then ultimately be able to qualify for a voucher the next year. Our next slide, Jolinda, if you want to go ahead and, again, this is the brochure that I was talking about, the nice little pamphlet. That's the second page of it, and then if you flip to the next one, that is the entire, if you would open it up fully. I think also if you haven't qualified your kindergarten students, that as you know, for a state voucher there are 7 pathways, and one of those is that sibling pathway. So if you have that kindergartner of a sibling, you want to make sure that you do have them on a voucher. And I think our kindergartners are the ones that we like to focus on more so for that tax credit scholarship, just to give them the ability to qualify for a state voucher as they enter into first grade. So again, keep that in mind. I don't think I really need to say much more at this point. You know, you can always reach out to Ben or myself. Ben, do you want to add anything? He's speechless at this time, can you believe it? But you know, you can reach out to me at any time, and we'll finish up here with our next slide with Jolinda taking the next steps.
Great. And I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, so it looks like we've got about 7 minutes in the time that we have reserved. the one true benefit of today's call is it's a lot of information that we've shared, but what will be most important is what can you walk away from the call with and implement. So I've outlined some next steps that you could take today. And the first one is who within your school, whether it's staff, a parent volunteer would be ideal. Who can be a team captain that you can pass this PowerPoint along to, as well as the toolkit along to, and say, I need your help in implementing. Ben is anxiously awaiting the name of every team captain he can get. So I'm going to pause here for just a second and allow you to take a moment to email Ben who your team captain is, what the role is that they serve in. Are they a staff, volunteer, and then any contact information you might have about them. If you don't have all of that handy, at least take a moment to think of who your team captain is, so that when you have a moment later today, you can pass that information along to Ben.
Ben is anxiously checking his emails now.
I know. Mary said he doesn't get enough emails, so that we should
Yes.
pause so you guys could write those down. He's really not speaking to you now, is he, Mary?
No, he's not.
You know, if you're stumped on this as well, I encourage you to make this a priority, because this is the individual who's going to be able to move things along. They're going to have questions. Direct them to Ben, to Mary, or myself. We're happy to guide them and coach them in some of the things that they can do to help your school be successful with tax credit scholarships.
And one more thing, Jolinda, anytime we communicate with team captains, we always CC that principal as well, just so that you know whatever communications are taking place too. So.
Yep. Another step, take a moment and download from the IQE portal who all your past donors are. You've got to have a place to start, and this is one concise location where past donors are listed. From that, if you haven't already, send a thank you. If you have already, tweak the letter that's in the appendix to say, thank you again for the gift you made last year, as it's having an impact on our students who start school on whatever date that might be. I also encourage you, it's on page 3 of the toolkit. It was a slide presented earlier. Determine what actions you're going to take. So from that chart, take a look at what you did last year, and then determine what are you going to do this year. And, you know, a target to shoot for is 5 to 6 things that you're going to implement to make more people aware and hopefully involved with the tax credit scholarships. If you need assistance on developing specific plans or strategies, we're here to help. Ben, Mary, myself, you know, the entire schools team, as well as the Office of Stewardship and Development, want you to be successful. We want you to cultivate your donors. And we don't want you to always be reinventing the wheel. So anything we have that we can share often just requires a quick conversation so that we know what you need so that we can help you move forward. And then another important thing that Ben, Mary, and I discussed was, you know, as principals, you're getting this information. So you got the toolkit, you get the PowerPoint, but there are probably others within your parish who might benefit from seeing or hearing this information as well. Determine whom those individuals are and pass this information along to them. Or if they want to reach out to us directly to discuss some of the information, we're happy to do that as well. And at that, I'll ask if there are any questions.
And if you want to just *6 your phone, if you have a question, that's fine. It's a small group here, so I think that would work.
Even if questions don't come to mind right now and you have them later, you all know how to get a hold of Mary and Ben. My email is jmoore, MOORE, @archindy.org. We'll be praying for your success and hope the school year starts off in a wonderful way for you and all your students. So thank you for taking the time to join us. Oh, sure.
One more thing, Jolinda. On page 3 of your toolkit, too, I know Jolinda did reference some of these checklists and these best practices, but there's actually a place where you can check off which of these you have done and completed, and you can send that my way, and then that way that gives us tells us that you are committed to be engaged in some fundraising efforts, and that when we then might have some additional funds from donors, that helps us determine some of the biggest need and the commitment of our schools out there. So that's on page 3 of your toolkit as well. So just keep that handy as you begin some of these best practices that Jolinda referred to in the webinar. And with that, we want to thank you very much for joining in with us today. Jolinda, I can't thank you enough. This has been very helpful and very beneficial.
Well, Mary, thanks again for having me, and for all the wonderful work that you and everyone involved in Catholic education does.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.